Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Rushcliffe Borough Council. I would like to remind everyone that the Cabinet meeting is live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel, and under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from the meeting, and any such use of images or recordings are not under the control of the council. So if I now move to first item, apologies for absence. I think we're all here. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any either pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest to declare? Nope. Okay, item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of January. Can I sign those as a true and correct record? All those in favour? Thank you. Which takes us to citizens' questions. There are quite a lot of citizens' questions. In fact, there are 11 in total, and we have to answer them or take them in the order they're received and answer them obviously in the order that they were received. There's 15 minutes in total for this session. So what I intend doing is starting the questions, and if we get to 15 minutes and haven't all been asked and answered, then there will be written responses provided to the questioners and on the website. I understand that none of the 11 questioners have actually attended this evening to ask the questions in person. Therefore, I will ask each question, and I think they're all aimed at Councillor Upton, so it'll be a bit of a ping pong match. I will ask the question and Councillor Upton will respond until we get to the 15 minutes, and then the rest will be in writing. So without further ado, I'll ask the first question, which is from Stuart Holmes. The report, and that refers to the Article 4 report. The report notes a clear concentration of HMOs in West Bridgford and recognises potential local amenity impacts, yet concludes there is insufficient evidence to implement an Article 4 direction. Given national guidance that Article 4 directions should be targeted to the smallest appropriate area to protect local amenity, why is a geographically targeted Article 4 not being considered as a preventative measure rather than relying solely on complaint numbers? Councillor Upton, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, for your question and my response. Whilst Article 4 directions should apply to the smallest geographical area possible, National Planning Policy Framework also requires that Article 4 implementation should be limited to situations where an Article 4 direction is necessary to protect local amenity or the well-being of an area. There is insufficient evidence to justify the implementation of an Article 4 direction, be that borough-wide or area-specific. However, we will propose continued monitoring. Sorry, my apologies. That's the end of my response there.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is from Simon Pett. How will the proposed continued monitoring differ from monitoring already undertaken, and what would trigger a change in policy rather than further delay? Councillor Upton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pett. Using the evidence used to inform the Cabinet report as a baseline, monitoring of planning applications, complaints received and licensing records will be undertaken. The recommendation is for Growth Scrutiny Group to review the further monitoring at the next available meeting, which is coming up, and the Council is committed to actively monitoring the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Tim Bull. How does the Cabinet recommendation align with full Council's unanimous decision in September to explore in Article 4, and what alternative policy tools are being proposed if Article 4 is ruled out? Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. At the full council meeting in September 2025, a motion was debated about a perception that the authority is experiencing an increase in small houses of multiple occupation falling within planning use class C4. Councillors directed officers to investigate and collate an evidence base to look at whether there is a case for introducing an Article 4 direction across the borough. The Cabinet report presents the evidence base and recommends to Cabinet that there is insufficient evidence to meet the legal threshold to justify an Article 4 direction to remove permitted development rights for HMOs. Planning permission is required to create large HMOs of 7+ occupants. Other regulatory tools which can be enacted if required on a case-by-case basis include, for example, the Environmental Protection Act of 1990 and the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Disorder Act of 2014.
Thank you. The next question is from Paul Smith. Given resident concerns about the Council's ability to effectively oversee and regulate HMOs once permitted development rights are exercised, how can Cabinet provide assurance that existing licensing and enforcement arrangements are sufficient, particularly when changes of use to small HMOs occur without any requirement for planning approval or public consultation? Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your question. Smaller HMOs still have to comply with relevant housing fitness standards and other relevant legislation, the same as any other private rented sector property. And the Council will investigate any complaints that are made about such properties, such as noise nuisance, antisocial behaviour, poor living standards, etc. The mandatory licences of HMOs came into force in 2006 with the Housing Act of that year and applies to properties of 3 stories or more with 5 or more people making up 2 or more separate households living there. Licences can last up to 5 years and will have conditions attached to them that must be complied with. All licensed HMOs are routinely inspected to ensure they meet all necessary statutory requirements. Licensing is intended to make sure that landlords of HMOs are fit and proper people or employ managers who are. Each HMO is safe and suitable occupation for the number of people allowed under the licence. The standard of management of the HMO is adequate. High-risk HMOs can be identified and targeted for improvement. HMOs are not overcrowded. There are currently 200 licensed HMOs with the following mandatory conditions which apply to every licence. A valid current gas certificate, gas safety certificate, which is renewed annually. Proof that all electrical appliances and furniture are kept in a safe condition. Proof that all smoke alarms are correctly positioned, installed and maintained. Each occupier must have a written statement of the terms on which they occupy the property. For example, a tenancy agreement, minimum sleeping room sizes, waste disposal arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Nuruddin Machui. Apologies if my pronunciation is not very good. The question is, the case studies cited in the report acted once HMO impacts were already severe. Is the council content to wait for comparable levels of harm locally before intervening, rather than acting earlier to prevent escalation? Councillor Upton.
Thank you for this question. National Planning Policy Framework also requires that Article 4 implementation should be limited to situations where an Article 4 direction is necessary to protect local amenity or the well-being of an area. There is insufficient evidence to justify the implementation of an Article 4 direction, be that at borough-wide or area-specific level. Thank you.
Well, thank you. The next question is from Sandeep Sur. Without an Article 4 direction in place, how does the council intend to prevent the incremental loss of family housing and manage the cumulative impact of additional HMOs in areas already experiencing high concentrations, given that permitted development removes any requirement for planning scrutiny or local decision making? Councillor Upton.
Again, thank you for this question. The National Planning Policy Framework makes it clear that any Article 4 direction must be supported by evidence that HMOs are impacting negatively on the local amenity of an area. It is the view of the Council that this threshold has not yet been met. The Council is also mindful of the variety of Rushcliffe residents requiring housing, including low-income individuals or young professionals who could only afford HMO accommodation. Cabinet is recommending that the matter is kept under review and further scrutiny takes place by the Community Scrutiny Group at the next available opportunity, which could be fairly soon, to respond to further changes in this area.
Thank you. The next question is from P. Barker. What specific level or type of evidence would officers require to recommend an Article 4 in future, and how will members know when that threshold has been reached? Councillor Upton.
Thank you again for this question. Well, National Planning Policy Framework, again, and the associated guidance does not stipulate a threshold or what specific evidence is required to justify an Article 4 direction. However, the framework does stipulate that the implementation of Article 4 directions must be based on robust evidence. This is why the Cabinet recommendation is to keep this matter under review and scrutinise it further. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Sue Jeffrey. Does the council accept that formal complaint numbers may significantly underrepresent impacts on local amenity, particularly where residents feel complaints are ineffective or are reluctant to pursue them? Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Ms. Jeffrey, for your question. The council regulates HMOs through licensing and reviews properties on a regular basis to ensure that complaints and any disturbance to the local community is kept to a minimum in line with local authorities across the country. There is insufficient evidence to support the implementation of an Article 4 direction, given the known numbers of HMOs, complaints received and issues identified through licensing and reviews of properties. Nevertheless, there are other regulatory tools which can be enacted, including, as I said previously, the Environmental Protection Act of 1990 and the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Disorder Act of 2014. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Natasha Walker. Given that the report identifies areas with concentrated HMOs and acknowledges resident concerns, how does Cabinet justify delaying action until impacts become severe? And what alternative measures are being considered to proactively protect local amenity and community cohesion in the meantime? Councillor Upton.
Thank you again for this question. The council regulates HMOs, as I said previously, through licensing and reviews properties on a regular basis to ensure that complaints and any disturbance to the local community is kept to a minimum in line with local authorities across the country. Smaller HMOs still have to comply with relevant housing fitness standards and other relevant legislation, the same as any other private rented sector, and the council will investigate any complaints that are made about such properties, such as noise, nuisance, antisocial behaviour, poor living standards, etc. As I said previously, mandatory licensing of HMOs came into force in 26 Housing Act of that year and applies to properties of 3 stories or more with 5 or more people making up 2 or more separate households living there. Licenses can last up to 5 years, will have conditions attached to them that must be applied with. All licensed HMOs are routinely inspected to ensure they meet all the necessary statutory requirements. Licenses intended to make sure that landlords of HMOs comply with a range of subject areas that I mentioned previously in the previous question. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Gary Selick. Over what timescale will monitoring take place before the issue is formally reconsidered, and will findings be reported back to full council?
Yes, thank you. The recommendation is for the Growth Scrutiny Group to review the further monitoring at its next available meeting, and the council is committed to actively monitoring the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question, according to my list, is from Tak Pang. Has a non-immediate Article 4 direction with a 12-month notice period, which avoids compensation liability, been fully assessed as a proportionate and lower risk option? Councillor Upton.
Again, thank you for the question. The implementation of an Article 4 direction must be based on evidence. If evidence justifies the implementation of an Article 4 direction, local authorities must then decide if a non-immediate or an immediate Article 4 direction would be the most appropriate. Whether immediate or non-immediate, an Article 4 direction must be supported by, as I said previously, robust evidence and applied in a measured and targeted way in order to comply with the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework and the Planning Policy Guidance. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes citizens' questions. So we now move on to item 5, which are the councillors' group leaders' questions. And so I've just, as a reminder to everyone, the group leaders' questions are taken in the order in which they're received, and there is a 5-minute maximum for every question and answer, including the supplementary questions and answers. And just to remind everybody that the one supplementary question which is allowed must be directly relevant to the original question. With that, could I invite Councillor Walker up, please? And when you are ready, if you'd like to put your question, please.
Okay, good evening. An expected benefit of local government reorganisation and the creation of a new unitary authority is that there'll no longer be a situation where one tier of local government has responsibility for collecting council tax on behalf of all tiers of local government in that area, thus eliminating the confusion of different administrations from different councils serving the same area, making their own budgetary claims in isolation, which is currently the case on page 8, paragraph 4.2a of this cabinet agenda, which states Rushcliffe faces a 2.4% reduction in its core spending power. Can the portfolio holder for finance confirm that this statement does not take into account the shared uplift that residents of Rushcliffe could benefit from through the 30% increase to the county council tax budget this year?
Thank you. So I'll ask Councillor Verdi, please. Would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Walker, for your question. The premise of this question is fundamentally flawed, and it is important to absolutely be clear about that at the outset. Local government reorganisation has not happened. No legislation has been passed, no unitary authority exists, and no decision has been taken on when or even how council tax might eventually be harmonised. That could take many years if it happens at all. Today, Rushcliffe Borough Council remains a separate sovereign legal authority with its own statutory responsibilities, its own budget and its own funding settlement. The figure quoted in the report, the figures are the Labour government's published figures for Rushcliffe Borough Council. They are not ours to invent, reinterpret or aggregate with other authorities. It is therefore categorically wrong to conflate Rushcliffe's financial position with that of Nottinghamshire County Council. What the County Council has received is irrelevant to Rushcliffe. Rushcliffe, in terms of our core spending power, in the same way that Nottinghamshire County Council, City Council rather, is irrelevant. There are different authorities with different responsibilities, different risks and different budgets. The suggestion that residents of Rushcliffe somehow benefit from a county council uplift when assessing this council's financial settlement is simply not true. It is a fundamental error, and astonishingly, it misunderstands how local government finance works. If there is any sleight of hand here, it lies in attempting to mask a poor settlement for district councils by pointing to uplifts elsewhere in the system. That may be politically convenient, Councillor Walker, but it is financially illiterate. As members will recall from the budget briefings, our Section 5.1 officer, who is sitting beside me, was clear that funding is increasingly being redistributed based on demand and deprivation. As a result, upper tier authorities have generally fared better than districts, including us, Rushcliffe. That outcome was predicted and it has now materialised. Finally, it's also worth saying that even the county council's position is not the simple picture being implied by Councillor Walker in the question. Any additional funding there comes alongside significant financial pressures, particularly in adult social care and special educational needs with major long-term liabilities and risks. To suggest that this council is somehow better off as a result of the settlement is misleading. Conflating county council finances with borough council finances does not help residents understand the truth. It obscures it. You cannot spend county council money in a borough council budget. Pretending otherwise may suit a political narrative, but it certainly does not reflect reality, and it does not help our residents understand the truth. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, do you have a supplementary, please?
Certainly do. Yeah, but people pay one council tax bill, and that was the point of it. And they were trying to understand how that money is spent is the crux of the question, actually, which you didn't really answer. But you make an interesting point on how that council tax money that people spend is spread. And we have examples of how that is done in our own council.
Could we have a question, please?
Yes. Shall I do it? Or are you
Yeah.
going to interrupt again? Okay. So Radcliffe-on-Trent, which has three members of that ward who sit on this cabinet, will be getting £1 million master plan. Well, the villages like Ruddington, Eastleek and West Bridgford are left fighting for the scraps. Can the portfolio holder for finance please explain the logic behind this increased spending on Radcliffe-on-Trent would he commit similar spending amounts to larger communities such as Rushcliffe, such as Ruddington, Eastleek and West Bridgford?
Sorry, that's 5 minutes. It's up.
Right. Is that so? With 5 minutes, that's it, isn't it?
That's it. 5 minutes is.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Now, could I invite Councillor Phillips to come forward, please? So when you're ready, just press the button. And so this is the first time you've asked the question here, isn't it? Yeah, I know. But I'll just ask the question and then you'll get the response and then I'll come back to you for a supplementary. Okay.
It may be that the analysis we're undertaken so far across the wider borough does not warrant a borough-wide Article 4 direction. As it is the current government's aim to remove all asylum seekers from hotels, they will all need to be housed somewhere. We all recognise the ease on how HMOs under permitted development can be obtained and the need to look at an Article 4 direction to take control of inappropriate HMO locations. In September 2025, at full council, a motion was submitted to look into Article 4 direction, and we all unanimously voted in favour of this. We did not, however, get a chance to debate because we ran out of time and we went straight to the vote. So my question, do you not agree that an Article 4 direction just within the heavily populated West Bridgford areas would give the council better control over inappropriate development and HMO locations?
Thank you. Councillor Upton, would you respond, please?
Thank you, Councillor Phillips, for your question. The challenge is that the legislation sets out that the implementation of an Article 4 directive must be evidence-led. In the review of this matter following the motion, the evidence did not support the making of a direction. Cabinet is also clear that the motion was not about asylum seekers, but the occurrence of a concentration of HMOs having an adverse effect on the amenity of an area as per the legislation. HMOs accommodate a variety of people, often providing an affordable place to live as part of the whole housing system. Unintended consequences must also be considered, such as limiting the supply of HMO housing for low-income people or young professionals starting out in their career, and HMOs perhaps moving to neighbouring areas where permitted development is still available. I recognise this is an important matter to consider and keep under review, which is why I'm asking the Community Scrutiny Group to scrutinise the matter and further consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Phillips, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, yes. So in my ward, if we had an Article 4 direction in place, it would have prevented a 4-bed property being converted into a 6-bed HMO, used to house single male asylum seekers on a quiet cul-de-sac of 8 other family properties and just meters away from a children's play area. If we had the Article 4 in place, it would have ensured the full planning application would have been carried out.
Could you just ask that's a statement. If you could just ask the supplementary question, please.
Okay, so would you not agree that there is evidence there to support an Article 4 direction?
Councillor Upton.
Thank you for the supplementary. I understand what you say, and you did allude to the fact that if there had been an Article 4 in position, then, as you quite rightly say, it would go for a planning application. And the planning application for that would be treated as the normal planning application process. And unless that there is a material planning consideration to be looked at there, unless there's any adverse ones, then you can't make an assumption, I think as you state, I paraphrase, that it wouldn't have become an HMO. We don't know that. It would have depended on the outcome of either the planning committee discussing that application or a planning officer under delegated powers. But I can't look into the future and I can't look into the past, but that is the situation it would be if we have an Article 4 directive anywhere, either borough-wide or in a local area. If it still has to go through the planning application process. I think we are agreeing, and that depends on that outcome about a number of material considerations of that particular property in that particular area and other aspects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Right, that takes us on to the next item, which is item 6, which relates to the budget and financial strategy. And I will ask Councillor Verdi, please, would you like to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It is with pleasure that I present to Cabinet this evening the proposed budget for 26-27, together with the 5-year medium-term financial strategy, which I'll refer to as the MTFS from here on, and the accompanying reports before us today. This has been a more challenging budget than usual to prepare, not because of decisions taken locally, but because of the scale of the systematic change in local government finance that we are now facing. The introduction of fair funding, fundamental changes to the business rate system, and the national reset of baselines have all landed at once. These are significant changes for every council, and my focus, of course, has been what they mean for Rushcliffe. Before I go further, there is one minor technical correction to flag, Chairman. The Band D tax figure referenced in the covering report and the MTFS annex should read £161.77 rather than £161.76. That 1 penny correction will be made consistently in the full council papers, including the recommendations. It does not change the substance of the budget, but it is right to be precise. Turning to the substance, what this budget demonstrates clearly and unequivocally is financial resilience. Despite ongoing reductions in government funding, we're able to freeze council tax, maintain a balanced budget across the full 5-year period, and sustain a strong and manageable financial position, even after the late national changes I will come on to shortly. Rushcliffe continues to have the lowest council tax in Nottinghamshire and sit within the lowest quartile nationally. That is a record we should be proud of, and I do not subscribe to the view that this is something to apologise for. Crucially, we are achieving this while continuing to deliver high quality services for residents and businesses. We are also continuing to invest in our people and our place. The budget supports a £24 million capital programme, and we do so from a position of strength. We remain debt free. That is no small achievement in the current climate. Our capital programme is focused where it should be, supporting the most vulnerable, improving communities and leisure facilities, enabling economic growth, reducing our carbon footprint, and continue to deliver strong core services. Fundamentally, this budget supports what matters most, keeping Rushcliffe a great place to live. Alongside this, we retain stable earmark reserves, projected to remain at around £25 million, giving us resilience as we look ahead, particularly with local government reorganisation on the horizon. And we continue to drive our transformation and efficiency programme, demonstrating that this council does not stand still, but continues to innovate, modernise and live within its means. Now, let me touch briefly on some of the key points as set out in section 4.2 of the covering report. This is a first multi-year settlement in over a decade, providing a 3-year financial framework. However, like many district councils, Rushcliffe has seen a reduction in core spending power of 2.25% for us at the moment. The reasons for this will become clear when we look at business rates, and business rates have undergone a national reset, as I said earlier, and the impact on Rushcliffe is significant. Our retained business rates reduced from 6.67 million to 2.729 million between 25-26 and 26-27, a reduction of 59%. This is partially offset by transitional grant and revenue support grants, but it also results in the dissolution of Nottinghamshire Business Rates Pool. Until very recently, the budget was based on the provisional settlement. However, I do need to update Cabinet on a late and material change following the final local government finance settlement, which was only issued yesterday or the day before. At the last minute, government has changed the treatment of business rates pooling gains, reallocating a significant portion of those gains away from district councils and towards upper tier authorities. This change particularly affects councils like Rushcliffe that were members of the business rates pool in 25-26. The immediate impact for Rushcliffe is as follows. In 26-27, government has recognised the lateness of this change and provided a only one-off transitional grant of £0.484 million, meaning we broadly receive our provisional settlement allocation for this year. However, in 27-28 and 28-29, that transitional protection falls away, resulting in an additional cost for us as an authority of around £1.2 million, with knock-on impacts on the MTFS. The detailed analysis is set out in paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6 of the addendum paper, which Pete has just shared with members in the room, and they have before them. And I would just like to say here that the council papers will be updated appropriately to reflect all of these changes when full council receives the papers. Taking this change into account alongside the other late policy decisions, which I'll come to in a moment, the overall MTFS position now shows a cumulative deficit of 0.815 million over 5 years. That equates to around 0.6 million per year. And I want to be clear, this is manageable, it's proportionate and will be funded from our organisational stabilisation reserve. Even after this late and adverse national change, the council remains financially stable, well-resourced and able to set a responsible budget. Against this backdrop, we're still recommending a council tax freeze for 26-27. This is a deliberate and considered choice, one that reflects both the strength of the council's financial position and the pressures residents continue to face. While a freeze means foregoing some additional income, it is fully affordable, underpinned by years of prudent financial management, disciplined decision-making, and a strong track record of managing costs and generating income. In the current cost of living climate, this strikes the right balance, in my view, between financial responsibility and fairness to our residents. Moving on, special expenses will see only a modest increase, and as a West Bridgford councillor, I want to note that the West Bridgford Special Expense Scheme continues to offer excellent value for money, supporting a vibrant programme of events that benefit residents and local businesses alike. The council remains firmly committed to economic growth, and while it's disappointing that our new homes bonus is no longer received, this was anticipated, and I've mentioned it previously, and we've planned for this within our MTFS. I would be remiss not to acknowledge some of the risks and uncertainties that remain, and simpler recycling is one of those, a clear example of the financial consequences of national policy change. By 2030-31, we anticipate an additional budget pressure of 0.879 million, and once again illustrating that new burdens are too often introduced without adequate long-term funding. Inflation, of course, funding volatility, and above all, LGR, which we keep talking about, remain the most significant strategic risks. This is not a council that rests on its laurels, and we are prepared and we remain vigilant. Finally, Chairman, I might have to have a sip of water here. I want to highlight two late policy changes set out in the addendum paper, which has just been handed out, and as I said earlier, which will be incorporated into the final budget for council papers. Firstly, Cabinet has expressed concerns recently about the effectiveness of the second property premium as a tool for bringing homes back into use. There are currently 130 such properties in Rushcliffe, generating approximately £290,000 in additional council tax across the collection fund, of which only around £20,000 relates to this council. It is arguable whether the second homes premium aligns well with the aims or effectiveness of the existing empty home strategy. We will therefore be recommending that this policy is ceased. Secondly, and importantly, we are proposing to explore a council tax discount for residents who are terminally ill. An issue that has been raised both by Cabinet colleagues, and also I would like to acknowledge Councillor Carys Thomas, who has recently spoken to me on this matter. Other councils have begun to adopt such schemes, and we believe this is the right thing to do. We are therefore committing £40,000 per annum at this stage and proposing a scrutiny review to review and assess the risk, demand and design of an appropriate scheme. Chairman and colleagues, this remains a strong and responsible budget delivered in exceptionally difficult and fast moving circumstances. It balances prudence with compassion, investment with restraint and resilience with realism. I hope Cabinet will support it today and recommend it to full council. And finally, I would like to place on record my sincere thanks to Peter Linfield, sitting to my left, and the entire finance team for their exceptional hard work, professionalism, resilience and patience, and dealing with me as well in producing this budget in a year of exceptional complexity and late national changes, which I've talked about earlier. So I commend the budget to Cabinet and the recommendations contained within section 2 of the report, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Wheeler, please?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So I'm delighted to second the budget proposal in front of us today. Freeze our council tax despite all the pressure and what feels like effective blackmail from the government to maximise it as part of their core spending power calculations. We make it very easy for us to do that, but we've chosen to support our residents instead. At a time when inflation is still high, bills are rising across the board, it's important we look at minimising the impact on our residents if we can do so, which we can thanks to the great management of the council's finances. The crucial thing is that along with freezing the council tax, we're still investing millions of pounds into our services. We are known for having fantastic services, leisure and play provision and community spaces. And so we're not only not cutting any of these or standing still, we make them even better. So every area of Rushcliffe can benefit from the grants we're providing for new pitches and changing facilities, for example, to our parish and town colleagues to bid into us for. We're investing at Rushcliffe Country Park, which is the jewel in the crown of Rushcliffe, and providing funding for areas like Eastleigh Leisure Centre, when it comes back into our ownership next year from the PFI contract, and of course open space across West Bridgford. We are continuing investment at Kiev Leisure Centre and putting £750,000 towards bringing empty homes back into use, which we absolutely support instead of to build on our green areas. I also welcome the proposals around support for those who are terminally ill. It's very important we look at these proposals carefully and sensitively and ensure we can deliver this timely and appropriately for our residents. So I absolutely welcome going to scrutiny to make sure we get it right for these residents. The second home premium as well is really welcome that we look into this. I absolutely understand why we did it, and I agreed with it at the time because it's right that we try to bring properties back into use for members of the public when we can. But it's obvious that at the moment that was also having some negative impact as well to residents. So to review this and make sure we are looking at ways to encourage people to get homes back on the market, it needs to be looked at further, which we are continuing to do. Again, as we've already said with the empty home premium work we're looking to do. As Councillor Verdi mentioned, West Bridge special expenses, very proud as West Bridge member to say that, we have a special expense limit is half of what many of our town councils charge, yet you look at the facilities we offer, there are many town councils out there who are sitting on reserves, who are not spending money, whereas our special expense is spent and delivered for people. And we can detail over the last year the amount of work gone into our play areas, for example, and leisure facilities, including the new community hall we're building at Sharp Hill, for example, to the West Bridge and Walton area. So absolutely welcome the fact that with that special expense we're keeping as low as possible while being able to say to residents what we're delivering. You've got some town councils and parish councils, for example, on trend to putting up 180% their precept. So you compare that to what West Bridge residents are paying, and it shows why West Bridge residents don't want a town council and want the borough council to keep delivering for them. So absolutely welcome the reports, Chairman. Not many councils in this country can deliver, freeze and still deliver the levels of investment we're proposing. We should pay for you as our plastic officers, as you already have done at the council, for their hard work, which has helped us propose this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So it has been moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions from anyone? I will just echo Councillor Verdi quite rightly emphasised that this is an extremely financially financially managed, well managed council, debt free, and it's in very prudent financial position. And the two additional items that he mentioned, the second homes and also the terminally ill discounts, I think that does show that we do listen to the concerns of expressed by residents of the borough, and that we are able to react accordingly due to the very stable finances which the council are in. And on that note, I would absolutely echo Councillor Verdi's thanks to Peter Linfield and all his staff for continuing over very many years. Can't remember how many years you've been here, but however, but even before your time, we have always prided ourselves, as long as I've been here, on how well financially run it is. So, if there are no other, I mean, obviously this is going to be forwarded on to full council, and this will become a full council debate in due course on the March the 5th. So without further ado, it has been moved and seconded. So all those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to Councillor Verdi and to Peter Linfield. Moving to item 7, which is the subject of all those earlier questions from citizens, and it relates to Article 4 direction. And we kept saying HMOs, but of course it is written there as houses of multiple occupancy. So I'll now invite Councillor Upton. Would you like to lead us off?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I think before I address the report in detail, I apologise, as you say, for any repetition of the comments that I've just made earlier in answering all those questions. So here we go. Well, at the full council back in September last year, we did indeed debate the perception that we were experiencing an increase in small HMOs falling within planning use class C4. And officers were asked to investigate and collate an evidence base on this, including any adverse effects on local amenities or well-being to communities, and to see whether there is a case for introducing an Article 4 direction to remove the permitted development rights for HMOs, small HMOs, of 3 to 6 unrelated people sharing facilities such as kitchens and bathrooms in a property. This has been done, and I have to say that at the present time there is insufficient evidence to meet the legal threshold to justify such an Article 4 direction in Rushcliffe. I understand the emotion and the call from certain individuals to have tougher HMO rules in Rushcliffe, but at present, as I say, we do not have sufficient hard evidence to require planning permission before a conversion of a property into a small HMO. This report gives information on the investigations and some relevant information about an Article 4 direction. An Article 4 direction is a legislative tool used to remove, restrict certain permitted development rights, including change of use from an area or specific property in certain limited situations where it is considered necessary to protect local amenities or the well-being of an area. And in removing specific permitted development rights, an Article 4 direction does not prevent the type of development specified, does not prevent it, but instead requires that application for planning permission. These planning applications would be treated the same as all planning applications, and unless there were compelling adverse material considerations as set out in planning legislation, then it is likely, I would suggest, that many of these applications would in fact be approved. The National Planning Policy Framework requires that an Article 4 direction should only be used to protect the local community and the well-being of an area, as I keep saying, but it must be based on what's termed robust evidence and apply to the smallest geographical area that is possible. Some statistics now. There are currently, I believe, 186 licensed, which is a 5+ person accommodation, HMOs, in Rushcliffe. And of those 186, 184 of them are within the West Bridgford area. And possibly, because it's difficult to get the hard facts, possibly a further 175 unlicensed HMOs of 3 or 4 person occupancy. So a total of around 361 licensed, unlicensed HMOs in Rushcliffe. Complaint levels were and are very low. In 2025, 4 residents raised concerns about 2 properties, whilst in the previous year, 2024, there were no complaints received whatsoever. In response to the concerns raised by residents, the implementation of an Article 4 direction requires, as I say, robust evidence to comply with the requirements of the NPPF. Quite frankly, this is currently not the case. It should be noted there can be some unintended consequences of introducing an Article 4 direction, such as reducing the availability of lower cost accommodation for young professional students and people on a lower income. In conclusion, this report states that most HMOs in Rushcliffe do not result in complaints, and there is no evidence linking them to antisocial behaviour. However, things may change, and it is recommended by Cabinet that Council continues to monitor the number of HMOs in the borough and any complaints received, and that this matter is kept under review, and that further scrutiny is done by the Community Scrutiny Group. I therefore make the recommendation that Cabinet agrees to those set out in item 2 of the report. Would you like me to go through them, Chairman, and an additional recommendation I would suggest as well.
Yes, Councillor Upton, I think given that you're proposing an additional recommendation, then to be clear that everybody fully understands the recommendations, if you could list them out, I think, on this occasion.
No problem. Well, the recommendations are: A, confirms that there is insufficient evidence to meet the legal threshold to justify an article for direction to remove or restrict permitted development rights for houses of multiple occupation HMO in the borough. B, requests that the number of HMOs and complaints received continues to be monitored. And the additional recommendation C, which reads, requests that the matter is referred to Community Scrutiny Group at the July meeting to scrutinise the following key lines of inquiry. Is there a robust evidence base demonstrating harm or risk of harm? What are the likely impacts, intended and unintended, of introducing an Article 4 direction to remove or restrict permitted development rights for HMOs? And finally, is making a direction proportionate, enforceable and aligned with local and national policy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to be absolutely clear to anybody watching, those the recommendations A and B, and Councillor Upton has just proposed an additional recommendation C, which we are considering as part of this agenda item. I'll ask for a seconder, Councillor Inglis. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I actually presented the original motion at full council in September last year for the investigation and collection of the compliant evidence, which is a fundamental basis to this council to seek an Article 4 direction for small HMOs. The subsequent report presented today by Councillor Upton and the citizens' questions he responded to clearly confirms that the legal requirements under paragraph 54 of the National Planning Framework for robust evidence does not exist at this time, and therefore an Article 4 cannot be justified. I'm pleased the evidence monitoring will continue and through scrutiny, and for the focus on West Bridgford, where the current density is the highest, and action to be taken should any trigger point be reached. But it is also worthy of recognition that the vast majority of HMOs do not give rise to complaints against the quality of life for our residents, and those that have been successfully addressed by this council. I'll also, just to clarify Councillor Phillips' supplementary question, in Article 4 direction, that purely ensures that the property meets the NPPF requirements in material planning matters, and there's no control to who the occupants will be or could be. So therefore, second recommendations as in part A, B and C, part 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Yes, a good point, well made at the end there. Comments, questions, Councillor Wheeler?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it's really worth reiterating the point I know Councillor Upton made earlier, that by having Article 4 direction doesn't mean you're not going to have a home converted to a HMO. It means that there is a further stage in that process where an application will go through the full planning process that we have now, which personally I welcome. I think it should be open and transparent, and residents should have the chance to have their say. But thinking that Article 4 is going to be some magic silver bullet to stop a HMO happening isn't the case unless planning policy is changed nationally. And obviously the council really can't change the planning policy. We just have to follow it in terms of guidance to make sure we do that. So I think the message to any resident who would like to see Article 4 legislation changed to make it easier for councils to be able to enact, or for the planning policy to be changed around HMOs, need to lobby their MPs wherever they are in the country, because they're the ones who can change that. Obviously planning law changes are currently planning to go through Parliament, although most of them are taking away powers from local councils. And might throw us a bone and put that one in there to give them more control, because I think it's right to be transparent about it and to be upfront with people to say that property mega HMO, as rightly to say, and rightly so. It's nothing to say you can say who will move into that home, as you can't do in any other walk of life, any other property on any other planning application. But I think it is right that we make that clear to people that just by having Article 4 does not mean you would not have HMOs, does not mean you would not have asylum seekers dispersed. So it needs to be the dispersal policy by the government and the HMO Article 4 legislation and the planning policy that needs to be changed. That has to be done at national level, not local. So that's where if people are really passionate about it, really encourage them to contact their MP, whoever they are in the country, if it's here in Rushcliffe, Newark, elsewhere, and are passionate about it, to lobby them to lobby for that change. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Well, the points I was going to make have been covered more than adequately by Councillor English and Councillor Wheeler. I think a lot of people seem to be under the impression or hopeful that Article 4 would be a preventative measure that would enable them to perhaps preclude from their area Serco provisioned accommodation for asylum seekers. That seems to be just the point that was made in the questions and implied in several of them. And the bottom line is that Article 4 cannot secure that outcome. It isn't designed to do that. And as has been said, for smaller HMOs under an Article 4 direction applying for planning permission, that does not give any say over who may be resident in those HMOs at all, which I think the point that colleagues have made. And the only way we would be able to have some kind of preventative measures rather than seeking to sort problems after the event is if there were a change in government policy, a change in government planning policy, or possibly a change of government. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? In actual fact, Councillor Brennan has very expertly prompted a comment that I was going to make, because I think this is firstly to emphasise Councillor Upton's comments that the evidence has to be there, but more importantly, for any changes to take place, as Councillor Brennan said, there needs to be a change in government policy in order that prevention could be then considered. So it's my intention to write to government to request that the government considers changing the legislation, and also considers allowing councils to make their own local decisions at the local level. So I will be doing that as a result, assuming this is approved. I'll be doing that as a result of it. Any other comments before I go to the vote? No, it has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That is unanimous. That brings us to the end of the agenda. Thank you for your attendance, and I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you.